My wife humiliated me at her boss's birthday celebration while I was sick. Then everything changed 20 minutes later. She said, "Brian, please," in front of 80 people. Quiet, controlled, irritated, the way you speak to someone who has become an inconvenience. That one moment told me more than anything that followed. Not that something was wrong. That it had been wrong long enough for her to stop hiding it. Viewers, before we continue, please subscribe, like and share. My name is Brian Bob. I'm 41 years old, a structural engineer based in Columbus, Ohio, and for the past 14 years, I've made my living calculating how much weight a structure can carry before it breaks. Bridges, mostly. The kind that hold thousands of lives on their backs every single day without anyone thinking twice about what's underneath. I understand load bearing. I understand the invisible stress that builds slowly, silently, inside a thing that looks perfectly fine from the outside. I thought that expertise transferred to other areas of life. I was wrong. My wife's name is Happy Brian. We met 11 years ago at a jazz festival in Cincinnati. She spilled red wine on my shirt and laughed so hard she couldn't get the apology out, and I remember thinking, this woman is going to wreck me. I was right. I just didn't know how, or when, or how quietly it would happen. Happy works in corporate events management at a firm called Crestline Partners here in Columbus. She's sharp, organized, magnetic in rooms full of people, everything I'm not at a party. Her boss, Raymond Holt, is 53, silver-haired, the kind of man who throws his birthday party like it's a diplomatic summit. This year, Happy told me Raymond's celebration was important. Career important. She needed me there. What I didn't tell you yet, what I didn't fully let myself see yet, is that our marriage had been quietly bleeding for 8 months. Not dramatically. No screaming, no thrown dishes. Just distance. Late nights she explained away. Calls she took in the garage. A version of Happy that looked like my wife but felt like someone I was being slowly introduced to for the first time. I showed up to Raymond Holt's birthday party on a Saturday morning with a fever of 101, a head full of fog, and the particular blindness of a man who has been believing what he needed to believe for far too long. 20 minutes after we arrived, everything changed. I woke up that Saturday with a fever of 101 and the specific kind of body ache that tells you your system is fighting something it isn't sure it can beat. Every joint felt wrong. My eyes were heavy behind the sockets. I lay there in the gray morning light of our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, running through the math of whether I could physically survive 4 hours at a birthday party for a man I barely liked. The thermometer was on the nightstand beside a glass of water I hadn't touched since midnight. I'd put it there myself around 2 a.m. when the chills started. Happy hadn't stirred. She sleeps deeply, always has, the kind of sleep that doesn't get interrupted by someone else's discomfort. By 6:47, she was already dressed. Navy wrap dress. Hair done with that particular precision she saves for events that matter professionally. She stood at the bathroom mirror applying lipstick like she was preparing for something I hadn't been fully briefed on. I told her I didn't think I could make it. That I needed to sleep it off. That Raymond would understand. She put the cap back on the lipstick. Slowly. Brian. Just my name. One word, flat and final, carrying the weight of an argument we'd apparently already had without me knowing it. It wasn't a conversation. It was a closing statement. 3 months before this morning, Happy had been passed over for a promotion at Crestline. She'd sat at our kitchen island with a glass of Riesling, jaw tight, and told me the problem was visibility. Raymond needed to see her outside of spreadsheets. Needed to see us, as a couple, as a unit. I hadn't questioned it then. Married people make sacrifices. So I reached for the Tylenol, told her I'd be ready by 7, and started getting dressed with hands that felt slightly disconnected from my body. What I didn't notice, standing right there in our own bedroom, was the small black overnight bag tucked behind the hall closet door. I should have noticed. The drive to Raymond's estate in Dublin took 22 minutes. Happy spent 19 of them on her phone, thumb moving fast across the screen, the blue light catching her face in the overcast morning. I kept my eyes on I-70 and told myself she was coordinating with the catering team. She'd mentioned something about a last-minute linen issue the night before. I held on to that detail like it explained everything. At minute 7, her phone buzzed and she tilted the screen, just slightly, just barely, away from me. The movement was so small I almost didn't register it. The kind of adjustment you make without thinking when the habit is already deep enough to be automatic. I noticed it the way you notice a hairline crack in a wall. You see it. You file it. You tell yourself it's probably nothing structural. For 8 months, I had been telling myself things were probably fine. Happy had started working late sometime the previous spring, March, maybe early April. The first few times, she called ahead. Then she started texting instead. Then sometimes I just hear the garage door at 9 p.m. and find her already halfway up the stairs, phone in hand, tired in a way that didn't quite match the explanation. I told myself it was the Crestline contracts. 3 major accounts that year. She was carrying real weight professionally and I wanted to be the kind of husband who trusted that. I was very good at being that husband. At the 18-minute mark she laughed at something on her screen, quick, private, immediately suppressed. She didn't share it. Didn't look up. I watched the exit signs and said nothing. We pulled into Raymond's estate driveway at 8:15. The property was already being set up, white tents, catering vans, staff moving across the lawn in coordinated black. Happy straightened in her seat. Something shifted in her posture, a quiet activation, like a phone screen coming on. I glanced up at the house. Second floor window. Raymond's figure, already there, already watching. Already waiting. The party was running at full capacity by the time we moved through the entrance, roughly 80 people spread across the rear terrace and garden, everyone performing a carefully rehearsed version of themselves. I shook hands I had no energy for. Accepted sparkling water I didn't drink. Smiled at people whose names I immediately lost to the fever. Raymond found us within 5 minutes. He moved through his own party the way certain men move through any room, like the space was built around him and everyone else was furniture that had been tastefully arranged. He was dressed in cream linen, unhurried, glass already in hand. He hugged Happy first. Both arms, full embrace, and when he pulled back he kept both hands on her shoulders for a moment and looked at her the way you look at something you're proud of. Then he turned to me. "Brian. You don't look well." "Just a cold," I said. He made a sympathetic face that lasted exactly as long as politeness required and then turned back to Happy. That was the last time Raymond Holt addressed me directly for the next 2 hours. What followed was something I can only describe as watching my wife become someone slightly different. Not unrecognizable, just shifted. She laughed differently around Raymond. Looser. Almost girlish, in a way I hadn't seen since early in our relationship. She touched his arm when she made a point. She tracked his glass and refilled it before he thought to ask. She leaned in when he spoke, like whatever he was saying was the most interesting thing happening in any room on earth. I found a chair near the garden wall and sat with my water and my fever and my slowly assembling understanding of what I was actually watching. 6 years Happy had worked for Raymond. 2 years in, she'd returned from a work trip to Nashville quiet in a way I hadn't known how to read. 3 days of careful distance. When I finally pushed, she said Raymond had made comments she called inappropriate. She never gave me specifics. I never demanded them. That old silence was sitting right beside me in that chair. A guest nearby whispered something to the person next to them. I caught only the tail of it. How long have those two been, before they noticed me and stopped. Raymond tapped a champagne flute at 11:05 and the terrace quieted around him the way crowds do for men who expect to be listened to. I assumed a birthday toast. Something brief, self-congratulatory, done in under 2 minutes. Instead, he launched into a story. He told it well, I'll give him that. It was about a conference in Chicago 2 months prior, where a venue had collapsed logistically at the last minute, wrong room, wrong AV setup, 200 attendees arriving in 4 hours, and Happy had apparently rebuilt the entire event infrastructure from scratch in an afternoon. The crowd laughed at the right moments. Applauded at the end. Happy stood at the center of the circle with color in her cheeks and a smile I recognized from the early years, the real one, the one that used to be for me. Then Raymond raised his glass and said, I told Happy, the right partner makes everything possible. He looked at her when he said it. She looked back. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Long enough. I started to stand. My legs had other ideas. The fever had been climbing quietly all morning and my body had apparently reached the limit of what it would cooperate with. I pushed up from the chair, caught the edge of the drink table with my elbow, and 2 glasses went over. The crash was sharp and sudden and 80 people turned at once. Happy turned. I have replayed her expression 10,000 times since that morning. It was not worry. It was not embarrassment on my behalf. It was irritation, clean, undisguised, reflexive irritation, the kind you can't manufacture and can't fake away once it's shown itself. I was an interruption. I was a problem in the wrong place at the wrong time. Brian, please, she said. Quiet. Controlled. In front of everyone. Someone near the back laughed, nervous, short, immediately swallowed. Raymond put his hand on the small of Happy's back. She didn't step away. I walked inside. Found the guest bathroom. Sat on the edge of the tub with my face in my hands and stayed there until the sounds of the party felt far enough away to breathe. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Columbus area code. I almost didn't look. The text read, Are you Brian Bob? Husband of Happy Brian? I think you need to know something. Call me. No name attached. Just the number and those 2 sentences sitting on my screen in that small white bathroom with its harsh overhead light and the muffled sound of Raymond Holt's party continuing without me. My first instinct was to delete it. My second instinct was the one I listened to. She answered on the second ring. Her name was Carla. She'd worked in finance at Crestline for 4 years, 2 floors below Happy's department. Her voice was steady, not emotional, not aggressive. Measured. The voice of someone who had decided something and was following through on the decision. She told me that 6 weeks ago she had walked into a conference room on the 14th floor without knocking. Happy and Raymond were inside. What she saw, she said, was not something she could interpret any other way. I asked her why she was telling me this now, at this specific moment, on a Saturday morning. She said, because Raymond fired me on Thursday. And because I just watched what happened on that terrace and you looked like a man who didn't know. You deserve to know before it gets worse. Carla had been building a documentation file for months, emails, hotel receipts, a recorded voicemail she wasn't supposed to have. She was preparing a wrongful termination case. Happy's relationship with Raymond was part of a larger pattern she'd witnessed and documented. Carla wasn't purely acting out of kindness. She was acting out of strategy. But the information was real. Happy had promised herself she would never stay somewhere she was unhappy. She'd told me that herself, years ago, sitting on the back porch of her mother's house in Memphis. Her mother had spent 19 years in a marriage that had stopped working by year 4. Happy said she'd watched that and decided, when something stops being right, you leave. I'd heard it as strength. Now I was hearing it as something else entirely, not a promise about tolerance, but a philosophy about exits. I sat on the edge of that tub for 6 more minutes. Then I stood, washed my face with cold water, and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I told myself I was going to the car for Tylenol. That was true. What I didn't expect was what I found when I opened the trunk. The small black overnight bag. The one I hadn't noticed that morning tucked behind the hall closet door, the one that had been right there while I was getting dressed and swallowing fever medication and trying to be a good husband. I stood in the parking area of Raymond Holt's estate in the midday light that had finally broken through the clouds, and I unzipped it. Change of clothes. Toiletries. A phone charger. And a bottle of perfume I didn't recognize, not her brand, not anything I'd ever bought her, not anything that lived on her dresser at home. Something new. Something chosen for somewhere else. I stood there holding that bottle for what felt like a long time. The party noise drifted from the back of the property. Someone laughed. A catering tray rattled. I put everything back. Zipped the bag. Closed the trunk. Then I called my brother Scott in Cleveland. Scott is a family law attorney. 9 years of practice, sharp and thorough and unsentimental in the way people get when they spend their careers watching marriages end badly. 3 years ago at a summer barbecue, with a beer in his hand and no particular reason to say it, he told me, "Brian, if you ever need me for anything in this department, don't wait. The ones who wait lose everything." I'd laughed. Changed the subject. Filed it in the back of a drawer I hoped I'd never open. I opened it now. Scott picked up on the first ring. I told him about Carla's call, the bag, the hotel receipt Carla had mentioned. He went quiet for exactly 4 seconds, I counted, and then his voice shifted into the register I imagine he uses in conference rooms. "Don't confront her tonight," he said. "Don't say a word. Go back in there and act completely normal." I walked back toward the party. Stopped when I saw Happy and Raymond near the garden wall, heads close, speaking in the tone people use when they don't want to be overheard. They didn't see me standing there. Acting normal is the most violent thing I have ever done to myself. I went back to my chair near the garden wall and I sat in it and I smiled when people spoke to me and I ate half a plate of food that had no taste and I watched my wife move through that party for another hour with the steady, awful attention of a man who was finally seeing clearly after a very long blur. Happy came over once, midway through that hour. She sat beside me, close, and pressed the back of her hand to my forehead the way she used to when our tenderness was still uncomplicated. "You're burning up," she said softly. I told her I knew. She said we could leave soon, just another hour, said it gently, said it with the exact warmth and cadence of a woman who loved her husband. She was good at this. That was the thing that kept landing on me, over and over, heavier each time. Not that she had done it. That she was this good at it. Which meant she had been doing it long enough to get good. Which meant the timeline I had been living in and the timeline she had actually been living in were two different stories wearing the same face. Her mother had stayed in the wrong marriage for 19 years. Happy had watched that and built herself into someone who wouldn't make the same mistake. But somewhere in building that exit strategy, she had also built the ability to stand next to the person she was leaving and feel nothing visible. I'd admired that composure for 11 years. Now it was being used on me. I pulled out my phone while she was back in Raymond's orbit. Took 2 photographs. Wide shots, nothing dramatic, just Happy and Raymond, her hand on his arm, his head tilted toward hers. Unremarkable to a stranger. A document to anyone who knew. Then Carla texted again, "There's a hotel reservation under his name. For tonight. I can forward you the confirmation." I typed back one word, "Please." I told Happy I needed to go home. Said it plainly, standing near the front entrance with my keys already out, no drama, no accusation, just a sick man who had reached his limit. She looked at me with that measuring quality she has, like she was running a quick calculation behind her eyes, and then she nodded and said she'd stay to help with the event breakdown. Part of her job. She said it the way you say something true that is also convenient. "I know," I said. I kissed her on the cheek. She smelled like that perfume from the bag. I drove back through Dublin alone, windows down despite the cold because I needed the air on my face to stay focused. Scott called at the 10-minute mark. I told him about the hotel confirmation Carla had forwarded, Raymond's name, tonight's date, a Marriott on Tuttle Crossing, 2 miles from the estate. Scott listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, Monday morning. Patricia Wells. She's the best family law attorney in Columbus and she owes me a favor. I'll send you her address. I stopped at a CVS on the way home. Bought more Tylenol. Sat in the parking lot for 18 minutes and let myself feel what I'd been holding at arm's length all day. Not anger, that would sharpen later, clean and useful. What came first was grief. The particular grief of losing something you realize you lost a long time ago, and the mourning is really for all the time you spent not knowing. 11 years ago she spilled wine on my shirt and laughed at the mess and I thought, this is a woman who knows how to survive chaos. That was true. She did. She just never told me that sometimes she was also the one creating it. I started the car. Drove home. Walked directly to the home office. Opened the filing cabinet. Pulled out the folder labeled Property and Accounts and sat down at the desk under the single lamp. I had work to do. Scott called at 3:30. He'd reviewed everything Carla sent, the hotel confirmation, the documented emails, the recorded voicemail she'd saved from a conversation between Raymond and a colleague that referenced Happy by name in a context that made the nature of things plain. Scott's voice was the voice he uses when he's already 3 steps into a solution and just needs you to keep up. By the end of that call I had 4 things in motion. A Monday morning meeting with Patricia Wells in downtown Columbus. A request to our joint bank for a full account activity baseline going back 14 months. A flag on the joint credit card for any new charges. And a call Scott was making that evening to a private investigator he trusted in the Columbus area, someone who had worked his cases before and knew how to document things that needed to be documented. I did not yell. I did not break anything. I sat at my desk with a 101 fever and I built, methodically, the way I build everything, a structure designed to hold weight under pressure. I thought about my bridges. I thought about how the failure point is never where people expect it. It's always in the connection. The joint. The place where 2 things are supposed to hold each other. Around 6 p.m., Happy texted, wrapping up here. Home by 8. Should I pick up dinner? I typed back, sure. Whatever you want. She sent a heart emoji. I put the phone face down. At 7:15 my neighbor Phil knocked. He stood on the porch looking uncomfortable in the particular way of a man delivering information he wishes he didn't have. He'd seen Happy's car, he said. Early afternoon. Parked outside the Marriott on Tuttle. He'd been driving past on his way to his son's baseball game. Thought I should know. He said it twice. Thought you should know. I thanked him. Closed the door. Stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I went back to the desk and kept working. Happy came home at 8:34. I heard the garage door first, then her key, then the specific rhythm of her heels on the kitchen tile that I have known for 11 years. I was sitting at the kitchen island in the near dark. I'd turned on one light, just one, over the sink, when I heard the garage. Enough to see by. Not enough to look like I'd been waiting. She had Thai food from the place on High Street we'd been ordering from since our 2nd year in Columbus. She set the containers on the counter and looked over at me and asked how I was feeling. Better, I said. And I meant it. Just not in the way she thought. She was still in the navy dress. Her hair had shifted slightly from the morning, softer, like she'd taken it down and put it back up. She smelled like the unfamiliar perfume. She moved around the kitchen with the ease of someone who had already processed the day and filed it away somewhere I didn't have access to. We ate at the island. I asked about the rest of the party. She told me about a vendor conversation, a floral arrangement dispute, something funny a colleague had said during cleanup. I nodded. Asked follow-up questions. Ate my food. She never flinched. Never paused too long. Never reached for a word she had to invent. She was fluent in this. Had been for a while. When she went upstairs to shower, I sat alone with the takeout containers and 11 years and the full weight of what I now knew. I thought about that jazz festival. The wine on my shirt. The laugh I'd mistaken for fearlessness. I thought about a woman who had promised herself she would always find the exit, and the man who had loved that about her without understanding what it meant for him. Monday morning I sat across from Patricia Wells with a folder, a phone full of documentation, and the quiet that follows real grief. She looked at everything. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Bob," she said. "You've been thorough." "I'm a structural engineer," I said. "I know how to find the point where something fails." The divorce filing went in that afternoon. Everything changed, quietly, completely, and on my terms. And what Raymond did 3 days later when he found out. That's a story for another time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and share for more interesting stories.